He and Miley met.
You're giving away all my secrets. This is what I'm going to talk about.
No, you're going to fill in, you're going to fill in the book.
I will.
Where in East Coast? Pennsylvania?
Yes.
Okay.
All right. So can I start?
Yes.
Thank you, sir. So the date was June 30th, 1957. And my life was changed forever that day. And that's the day my father was killed in a car accident. And I was 4 months old. And so my brother, who was 2 years old, and my mom moved from Dallas, Texas to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And the reason we moved was to live with my mom's sister, her husband, their 4 boys, and my maternal grandmother. So there were 10 of us. So even though the death of my dad was a tragedy, it also resulted in a wonderfully loving family of 10. So there were 10 of us. My older brother and my 4 cousins, who I consider my brothers, who are all older than me.
All boys.
All boys.
Oh
my mother, my aunt, my uncle, my grandmother, and my mother and grandmother were 100% Italian.
Oh my God.
So I was raised in Italian culture. So what that means is a lot of love and wonderful food.
Yes, food.
So I had a wonderful childhood, and it was interesting because my mother had no money, but my uncle was a doctor. So I was raised in a privileged family, but my mother could not afford to send me to private school. So I had a financial scholarship to go to a very elite, prestigious private high school. And my mom worked full time. So it was an unusual situation. I was on financial aid, and yet I was living with my uncle who was a doctor. So anyway, so then my life changed again. Here's how it changed. I was applying for colleges, and I was only applying to schools on the East Coast. And my brother Richard, who was getting his residency at Stanford University, came back and said, "Michael, I want you to apply to Stanford." And I said, "I've never heard of it." And he said, "That doesn't matter. Believe me, trust me, it's a good school." So I applied. And my other brother called me one day at school and he said, "You got the letter from Stanford. Can I hold it up to the light and tell you whether you got in?" And I got in. So it was an interesting decision because I had people in my grade. There were only 72 students in my senior year. 38 of them went to Ivy League schools, more than half. But nobody went further than Chicago. So it was a very, very big decision for me.
What year was this?
This was 1975.
Oh.
So I decided to go to Stanford, and I will never forget, when I got to the airport in San Francisco, there was a chartered bus for Stanford students. And for those of you that have been at Stanford, there's a drive down the main school, and it is absolutely gorgeous. And I had come from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and I remember saying to myself, "I have made the right decision." And it proved to be. So, first day of my sophomore year, and I'm very much involved in a relationship, romantic relationship, with a woman named Kathy. First day of my sophomore year, I meet Miley, and we speak for 5 hours. 5 hours. So I go up to my roommate. His name was Mike. I woke him up. I said, Mike, I just met this incredible lady. And he said, "What are you talking about? You're with Kathy." I said, "I know, but this lady's incredible." And that was mine. And so that changed my life forever again as well. So I then went to UCLA Law School. Miley went to UCLA Business School. And I did something that I'm not proud of. I did extremely well in law school and was recruited by private law firms, none of whom I ever wanted to work for. I never wanted to work for a private law firm because you don't have any control over who your clients are, and you're generally working for large corporations who I had no interest in. but I did really well, and I got kind of sucked into it and went to work for a huge law firm, one of the largest in the country, in Los Angeles, and was very unhappy. And then I got my dream job, and that was working for Mayor Tom Bradley. Incredible opportunity. I was thrilled to work for the mayor. And then we came back to visit Miley's family one Christmas. I went to Aloha Stadium where there was a football game, and it started to rain. And on the screen they flashed, now that the weather has become inclement, that's the word they use, please use your poncho instead of your umbrella so the person behind you can see. Mahalo. Now I'm living in Los Angeles, and I say, wow, that is special. The game ends and they flash on the screen. Now that the game is over, look and see if your neighbor has left anything of value. And if they have, gently tap them on the shoulder. Mahalo. I drive back from Aloha Stadium to Kailua, and I say to Miley, we're moving to Hawaii. And she says, what are you talking about? You have your dream job with Mayor Brown. I said, I know. I want to live in a place that has the values that I saw reflected on that screen. And never, ever question that decision. So December for us will be 33 years since we moved home. But then I made the mistake again. I took a job with a law firm.
What do you mean they paid for us moving?
Yeah.
That's really helpful.
I took a job with a law firm, and in the meantime, Miley and I moved to Aikahi Park in Kailua. And if you're familiar with that, there's a wonderful school at Aikahi Elementary, and the kids would literally walk to school each day. It was very, very magical, and a wonderful sense of community. So that was a great decision. And then I took a real risk. I left, so I was with a firm called Carl Smith.
Hi, Emma.
Good morning.
Good morning.
This is daughter Emma.
So if you're familiar,
Long time.
You're not born yet.
yeah. If you're familiar with the Carl Smith firm, it's a very prominent firm in Hawaii. And I took a job with them, and soon, within a day, I realized again I had made a mistake. Because I was representing corporations on issues that had no meaning to me at all. And then I took a risk. A job opened up with the Board of Education. It was a newly created position to serve as staff to the Board of Education. And I took a 35% salary cut, 35%. And Miley was totally supportive of that decision. So I went and worked for the Board of Education, and back then they were elected. Now they're appointed, but they were elected. And it was the strangest group of 13 people that I have ever worked for in my life. It was unbelievable. So I was there 2 years, and then I saw an ad in the paper. This ad changed my life forever. It was an ad for the director of the Mediation Center at the Judiciary. And I had some mediation experience, so I applied for the job. And I got an interview. So it turns out 67 people applied for the job. They gave an interview to 5 people. And in the interview, the person leading the interview was Chief Justice Ronald Moon. At the time, he was an associate justice. He wasn't Chief Justice yet. And one of the members of the panel asked me a question that kind of implied that I embellished my resume. And Ron Moon looked at me and he winked, as if to say, I know that's a crazy question, Michael, just hang in there. So I answered the question. I came home that night and Miley said, did you get the job? I said, I don't know if I got the job, but I met this incredible guy named Ron Moon. So then his assistant called and said, Michael, you're one of 2 finalists. But Associate Justice Moon has advice for you. One word of advice for you. Relax. So I'm on the phone. I said, okay, thank you. So I had the phone and said, relax, relax. What is he trying to tell me? I must have been too intense. So I show up for the final interview, and I get the job. And when I go to meet Associate Justice Moore, to negotiate salary. He says, Michael, in the first interview with the 5 people, do you know how many times you pulled up your socks? I said, no. He said, 16 times. In other words, I was so nervous, and I wasn't aware that I was doing this. And then he said, in the final interview, do you know how many times you pulled up your socks? I said, no. He said, once. You relax. And that started a 26-year relationship with my mentor. He ended up being my mentor. And then I got a series of jobs. He then asked me later to be the director of the state court system, which I served at, which really taught me about managing and working with people. Because I had 1,800 employees, 1,800 employees. I was responsible for them. I had a $200 million budget. I was responsible for that. And that's where I learned how to run a large organization. And then I decided that I really wanted to be a family court judge. Never having worked in family court. But I had mediation experience. And guess who appoints the family court judges? Chief Justice Ronald Moon. And I'll never forget, I was an applicant, and he called me into his office and he said, Michael, guess who just called me? He said, Senator Dan Inouye. And guess what? He wants me to appoint somebody else. And you know how powerful he is, right, Michael? So I'm thinking to myself, oh my gosh, he's going to appoint the person. He says, well, guess what? I'm appointing you. And if Senator Inouye is not happy with it, so be it. So I served as a family court judge. And I served as a family court judge for just under 8 years. I had 10,000 cases. My first case, I'll tell you my first case, Emma was a 16-year-old boy who had assaulted another boy at school. And the court officer, the probation officer said, Judge Broderick, what is your disposition? What is your decision? In other words, what are you going to do with this young boy? And I said, to know that, I need to know about him. Tell me about Keola. And right in front of Keola, here's what she said. His father hung himself in federal prison. His mother's been a prostitute in Waikiki for the last 20 years. And his mother's boyfriend has been sexually abusing Keola since he was 10. That was my very first case. And then I had 10,000 just like that. And my last case in family court, 2 brothers on the restraining order count, both trying to kick the other out of their family home. Why? Their mother had died, and whoever didn't get to live in that home would be on the street. One brother had 24 criminal convictions, the other brother had 28 criminal convictions. Those were the bookends of 10,000 cases that I had found. And so what happened is that the suffering became too much for me. And it changed my perspective on life. So I would go to the grocery store and I'd look at a man and I'd say, is he sexually abusing his son? Is that boy about to steal that candy bar? That's how my life began to see the world. And so I knew it was time to leave. I was on the board of the YMCA of Honolulu. I was on their board of directors, and I knew the incredible, wonderful programs that the Y has. People think about the YMCA as swimming and gym, but it's so much more than that. They have drug treatment programs, gang prevention programs, youth and government leadership programs, diabetes prevention programs, college preparation, everything. So I decided I'm going to throw my hat into the ring and apply for this job. Never having worked at the YMCA in my life. And the Y had never hired as the CEO someone who had no YMCA experience. But as I can't help myself, I really prepared for that job. And I developed a vision in my mind about what I would do if I was selected as the CEO. And I also did a lot of reading on the history of the Y and how impactful it had been in World War II. It had housed a number of the soldiers a lot of historical things that very few people knew about the Y. So I went into my interview and there were 10 of them, 9 men and 1 woman. And I shared with them my vision, and I shared with them the history of the Y and the impactful role it had played in the state of Hawaii. And I knew that I might get the job when I saw that 5 of the 10 started crying. That's when I knew I just might get this job. And I remember actually Emma, there's no reason Emma would remember this, but Emma called me after the interview and said, "Dad, how did it go?" And I said, "Emma, I might get it." Well, I did get it. And I was so thrilled to get the opportunity. So I started at the Y, and believe it or not, it's been 9 years.
Wow, I didn't realize that long.
But then my life changed again. 2 years into the YMCA, loving my life was perfect. Miley was on fire, things were going great, the kids were all doing wonderful things. I went in for my annual physical, and I walked out with prostate cancer. How could this be? I was so healthy, I had no symptoms. Prostate cancer. I had surgery, and I developed, and they still don't know what happened, I developed severe abdominal pain about 2 months after the surgery. It was chronic, and it was severe, which means that I had it 24 hours a day. And what happened to me is I became very depressed, clinically depressed, very depressed. Had to stop working for a while, had to get some treatment, some help. Felt better, and then guess what happened? My cancer came back. And I had 37 radiation treatments. Now I've been good for 3.5 years. So I get a blood test every 6 months, and so far so good. So that brings me up to the current time. And life is good for me. Miley and I have now been married 37 years. Marriage, for those of you that are married, Lorna, you know that marriage is never perfect, and our marriage has not been perfect. We've had ups and downs. I can tell you that the ups have been many more than the downs, but I don't want to misrepresent it. We've had some downs too. But we're still together and still very much in love. We have 3 children who really are what make us the most proud. Our son Drew is 31. And I told Nakeʻu, and I can tell you folks now, Drew just got a job. He is going to run the art gallery at the Kapi'olani Community College, and he's going to teach curation, art curation at Kapi'olani. So we are very excited about that. He just finalized it today, actually, so the timing was perfect. Emma, who we're so proud of, works for Kīpuka. And Emma works with children, the type of children that I saw in family court. She works with children who have had very difficult lives, who are struggling with motivational issues, and Emma does a beautiful job in how she relates to those children. Miley and I are very proud of Emma and the work that she does. And then we have Hannah, who's 23. Hannah has finished 3 years of college. She's dealing with some struggles right now, but she's feeling better, and she's living with us. And then the last thing I wanted to share was, I've learned over time, and this took me some time to learn this, that I am a guest here in Hawaii. I try as best I can to respect the host culture. I realize the history of Hawaiians. I learned about the history a lot in family court, because I saw so many Hawaiians in family court who I believe have suffered historical trauma because of the way that Hawaiians were treated, and I believe that trauma contributes a lot to some of the struggles that Hawaiians have today. So I never try to forget that I'm a guest here, and to be as respectful of the Hawaiian culture and the Hawaiian people as I can be. And if I forget, Miley reminds me. So that's the arc of my life, and that's what I wanted to share with you. Beautiful.